Hello everybody, and I said we'll be doing this eventually. Today we're looking at acrophobia. And what is acrophobia? Well, most commonly it's known as the fear of heights, and this is, well, the fear of heights. And just to have an irrational fear of falling off a certain height, yeah, this is easily probably the most common fear out there, and I can imagine that most people watching this probably actually have this phobia. I suffer from acrophobia, as I've suffered from every single fear I've covered so far, and well, I'm utterly terrified of heights. I can't even stand on top of a chair to change a light bulb. I'm 6'2", I'm incredibly tall, so even just standing on top of a chair is enough to freak me out, hence why now I just live in darkness because no light bulbs are being changed. Oh, fuck's sake, there's water everywhere. Ah! Fucking knee. I always remember at an early age having nightmares about falling off certain places. I remember one dream of in particular when I was dancing on top of a table, and next thing I know, I've tripped over my own foot, fell off the table, and just as I hit the ground, I wake up in my own sweat and feeling all the weight go back into my body. And this kind of emulates the feeling that I get when I look over a ridiculously high edge, or even once again, if I just stand on something as simple as a chair. If I look down, all the weight in my body seems to just completely leave. I feel weightless, I feel dizzy, I lose balance, I get worried that someone all of a sudden is just going to push me out of nowhere. It's completely irrational, I understand that. I can't stand up straight just in case I accidentally slip, to the stage that I really can't even trust my own body. Like, it's very strange, but I've read up and this is actually a very common effect. I've actually never been into an airplane either, and so I don't know what the sensation of that would feel like. I don't know if I would panic because I'm knowing I'm being so high up, or I don't know if I'll be relaxed because I know at least if I fall I'm gonna die. I have this completely strange backwards way of thinking about skydiving, for example. I would love to skydive, and I kind of feel like I probably would skydive because when I hit the ground at least I'm gonna die and not have to really think about anything else past that, where when you fall off something quite high you feel the pain and it sort of stays with you, and that's the part I fear more than most. So yeah, I don't know, maybe I'll be able to skydive, but I'm not too sure because I've never actually done this.
Get us a chip.
Sorry?
Maybe salt and nose.
Yeah, what should have salt on?
This is one of those phobias that I thought would be practically impossible to even give you the slightest effect inside a video game, until a few years back when someone I knew actually couldn't even play Mirror's Edge, and it completely confused me because when you play video games and you think of the fear of heights, it completely gets rid of the sense of scale and it completely gets rid of the sense of fear, therefore eradicating the possibility of death, therefore well, the fear shouldn't be there overall. But for this person, they couldn't even look at Mirror's Edge, for example, and this was also the same time around when Amazing Spider-Man first got shown, and we saw that cool first-person trailer that she couldn't even watch because it had put her into a bit of a panic, and falling off heights in games would make her react, and even climbing on top of a tower on Assassin's Creed just to jump off would get a reaction out of her. And I find this quite interesting to see someone who sort of panics in the same way that you would panic when you're afraid of heights. I don't know whether or not that's like a nausea, motion sickness thing or not, but I find it quite interesting that it was able to sort of correlate into a game, let alone before VR came about. So going off the motion sickness effect that can also emulate that fear of heights, let's take it back to 2005 when GTA San Andreas was still about. Once again, this game seems to be the start of a lot of phobias that I have in video games, and this was probably the first time that I guess I experienced this fear or even sense of endorphins from jumping off a high height. So let's take you back in time. The year is 2005, I understand the game came out in 2004, but I had the original Xbox port which came out in 2005, I had an 8 Mile poster on my wall, a Game Master cheat book in my hand, remembering all the GTA San Andreas cheats, and well, and to this day I can remember the flying car cheat like the back of my hand. And as soon as you put this in, this practically gives you full access to the map, also a help with the Never Wanted cheat. I used to always fly to Mount Chiliad almost immediately. There's something about this location which I find super iconic to the GTA series, and I think that's just because it gave me my early adrenaline rush as a kid. That's right, I was a badass. Fuck crack cocaine, fuck weed, fuck drinking beer at a young age. Nah, I used to go on top of this mountain, get inside a vehicle, pull it into first person and drive straight off, and this made my belly drop. Even to this day, when I went to get this footage, it made me feel motion sick, but it also made my belly drop. It does such a great job of emulating that effect, and I don't know if that's just because of the limited range where you can see, because of the fog it sort of makes you not know what's up ahead, so it makes your body go into some sort of panic, or I think that's maybe just because of the limited view and maybe your body's like, whoa, okay, it's like being on a roller coaster. It's a really cool effect and I recommend doing this, and if you've played GTA San Andreas, chances are you probably already have. Pre-VR, this is probably the earliest I could probably imagine my body actually emulating the effects of acrophobia, well, at least in a video game that's third person, because I really can't think of it, and not even Mirror's Edge did it for me. But when I do think of VR, of course this is where it's probably going to come into play a lot more than the previous phobias. VR here at least plays on the idea of scale, and that is almost its selling point. When you think of VR, a lot of people think of that plank walking game, which is a very fun experience, and I gave it a go, and this does emulate the fear of heights so well. From the sounds of the city, from the wind blowing in your ears, from the way that your world and your character slightly shakes, it almost feels like you're losing balance, and it makes you panic, and it makes you realize that, holy shit, I'm probably a lot higher than I really think. Though you're completely on the ground, this game did a really good job of that. But if I really want to talk about games that emulate that fear of heights and emulates the uneasy, the lightheadedness that you feel when acrophobia really kicks in, I want to talk about an underrated game that not many people really talk about, is The Climb. And in The Climb, all you do is, as the title says, you climb. You climb onto top of mountains and beautiful landscapes. And this game doesn't give you no reward besides, well, life itself. And that's something that this game does so well to emulate that effect. It's not just making you feel high and the screen starts shaking and you look down, it's like, whoa. But the game itself makes it feel like you're actually rising above the rest of the world, and the nature around you and even other extreme sportists around you are actually getting on with these activities, such as flying a helicopter or flying in wingsuits. But also there's animals up there who just react to you so naturally that it's such an incredible game to look at, and is hands down one of the most beautiful VR games out there, and that's all achieved with CryEngine 3. Thanks for reminding me. With this game, you have to focus on your character's stamina, you have to focus on your character's grip, you have to focus on what you're going to grab, and what dirt may even be lying on each space that you're going to grab for, which you may have to clean off beforehand. It all happens in such real time that you actually end up feeling like you're climbing. Your arms start to ache. It feels very, very strange to get into at first, but once you start immersing yourself into the world, and once the game tells you that, hey, this world is living and breathing, you really start to believe it, and I think that's something that really does amplify the effect of getting higher. As I mentioned earlier, there's just animals, there's birds, there's puffins, there's just strange ongoings that can happen in our real world that this game emulates so well to make you believe you are in this living, breathing world. And I'm talking about the world so much because I think that's an important part of acrophobia, and I think that's an important part of the effect of acrophobia within VR games at least. But something else is, this game reminds you that it is an adrenaline based game, and when your character falls, the screams that they let out when they know they're about to plummet to their death is frightening, and it really does put you on edge, and it does make you feel unnerved, and it also does motivate you not to fail. And I also want to talk about another short experience game here called Face Your Fears. Not Face Your Fears 2, which is a fully fleshed out game, which I actually did do a review on, but Face Your Fears 1 is one of those early VR games which sort of just show you maybe a short experience to show you what the VR technology has to offer, and this one focuses on heights. Well, at least one story in here does. You start off in a building, you're looking around, and next thing you know, there's jets, there's a giant robot, and then you're being grabbed by the robot. And this is probably the best example I have felt of height in any VR game ever. And that's because it puts you on such a small pedestal, it leaves you there waiting and watching and just confused about your surroundings with a lot of shaking, the lightheadedness and the way your character sways left and right, but most importantly, the way the world feels around you emulates the effect of being high up. And every time that I go back to revisit this, I think I'll be used to it, but no, it does such a perfect job of capturing the effect that I can't help but feel lightheaded, I can't help but feel frustrated, and I can't help but feel trapped on this little tiny pedestal where I feel like I'm about to fall to my death, shaking and actually feeling unbalanced, and my body goes into a full meltdown and panic. And I want to say that this did a fantastic job. I like the fact when you fall, it just feels completely unnerving, and it is enough to throw you off your balance in the real world. When I was a child, my biggest dream was to be Spider-Man. I know the sky's the limit and I was probably reaching a little bit far there, but you know, anything's a possibility. But the idea to have super strength, have a sense where you'll be able to tell when danger is coming, and just to be able to climb walls by touching them and pulling yourself up would be incredible. But then also there's the web swinging. Just to think about the idea of web swinging and the fact you have to swing so high up through New York. No! Who would want to do that? This would be utterly terrifying, and luckily they made a VR game just for people to experience what it would be like, and I thought that this would be the one moment where I would feel acrophobia like nothing before. but unfortunately it has a completely different effect, and I think that comes back to that important point I was making about the climb and even face your fears, is that the world doesn't feel alive. As I sit on top of these buildings watching over New York thinking, hey, I can't wait to be able to just start swinging, let the world know I'm Spider-Man and build up momentum, I was almost waiting for my sense of acrophobia to kick in to make me go, no, don't jump off this building. But then there's no threat in this game. You can't die when you hit the floor. The greatest part about playing Spider-Man 2 was climbing to the top of the highest building in that game when Spider-Man does that weird fucking shit. Spider-Man, just get on top of the fucking building! And just looking over the city, and they did such a good job of capturing that atmosphere. You knew when you was high up, the wind told you, the music even told you, the fact it died down, it was quiet, it was eerie, and it was knowing that you were about to jump. And the fun point of jumping off that building is trying to use your web swing at the last possible second, otherwise Spider-Man will go. And in this VR game, I think they did a good job with the swinging. I've made a video on this before and I talk about it feels like you're floating more than swinging, but with what they have done here is very, very cool, especially for a free idea like this. It's totally worth it and it's great to master, but there's no threat here of dying. You're not going to feel like you're going to hit the floor and crash to the ground and go, I'm going to die. There's no atmosphere about it. This is what the game sounds like. This is not edited. It's dead, it's quiet, there's nothing about it that makes you feel like you're living in the real world. The fact you can't take damage from full damage, and the fact that there's just no one talking, there's no one being like, yeah, Spider-Man, there's no one being like, where's my balloon? Like, it's stuff like this which makes Spider-Man's web swinging in games feel so great, gives it that sense of scale, and even gives it that sense of speed as we've seen in the new Spider-Man game on PlayStation 4. But if you don't have full damage, then you're not going to feel that same adrenaline. You're not going to feel like you have to do it at the last second, and you're not going to feel like being high up has a consequence. There's no consequence of jumping off a building rather than hitting the ground for it to all of a sudden get really boring and really quiet. And that for me is what makes my brain go, hey, wait a minute, this isn't the real world. You're not high up, you're just playing a simulation. But what I wanted to really say is that yes, acrophobia clearly can exist in the game. I didn't touch too much on Mirror's Edge because I couldn't understand the same experience. I couldn't understand that motion sickness or even that falling feeling that the person felt when they saw me play the game or when they watched the first Mirror's Edge. I feel like it just doesn't react to me in the same way, so there's not much I can comment on. Yes, I can understand the motion blur of it possibly because that's just how the game looks. It's fast paced and it's meant to be like that, but overall here I don't think there's much I can relate to when it just comes to a normal video game to have acrophobia within it. I think VR on the other hand though definitely has potential, and obviously games that want to focus on height and scale, well, VR is the place to do it, and VR is definitely going to capture it more perfectly than some. But as I mentioned, that I feel like the life around the world and even the life within the game needs to feel correct. The Spider-Man game feels a little bit off because it feels a little bit synthetic, it feels fake, and it feels like a simulation, where the climb captures reality. It catches the small glimpses. Even when you feel like you've had enough of life, the game just sort of continues. It does its own animation. There's a whale, there's a submarine, there's jets flying through the skies, and it's really, really pretty to look at, but it also feels so alive. And I think that's the most important part when it comes to acrophobia in video games, is to trick the brain to make it realize, hey, wait a minute, I'm really high up right now and I'm about to die. Obviously I didn't get that feeling when it came to traditional video games, unless I was talking about San Andreas, which in that case is awesome. Anyway, that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed my look at acrophobia within video games. Let me know experiences that you had with acrophobia in video games, and did it affect you? Maybe Assassin's Creed, or even maybe games like Prince of Persia, or even further back. I would like to know. I think it'd be quite interesting to sort of get people's experiences on this, as it's something I'm not really too familiar with in a traditional sense. But yes, if there's anything else you want me to look into, please let me know down in the comments below. I might even start looking into more interesting and maybe even more scarier phobias. For example, for Halloween, maybe I should do a phasmophobia, which is the fear of ghosts, which is, well, of course, very relatable for a lot of people, and once again, guess who suffers from it? But yes, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please let me know. Leave a like, leave a comment, leave a dislike. It's entirely down to you. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and of course, I'll see you at the next checkpoints.